Hi, and welcome back to the National Cathedrals Conference podcast for 2022, and also welcome back to our last episode of the podcast. Today was the last day, and it was the shortest day, and slightly sad as well, but it's nice to be able to relax a bit after a very hectic and busy week. Jordan, how are you feeling after such a long and tiring week?
Looking forward to sleep. That's all I have to say.
I think that's a very good point. Sleep would be nice after you recording and then editing so late in the night. It must be nice to have a solid maybe 7 hours.
Yeah, looking forward to 7.
7 hours. Woo! So all the delegates have made their way home now. But before they made their way home, we had 4 wonderful speakers. We had Michael and Jenny, who discussed new cathedrals measures and the journey ahead. We had Eve Poole, who reflected on the conference as a whole and action planned for future of the cathedrals. And we finished off today with Stephen Cottrell, who is the Archbishop of York, and had a wonderful speech titled Cathedrals, A Change of Heart, which is what we'll be focused on our podcast on today. Jordan, how would you generally summarise the podcast?
I think he just basically just recapped the last few days, and without directly mentioning any of the topics, he just said these are basically the main points that the church needs to focus on to move forward and to continue the change that it's already done.
Yeah, I definitely agree. He summarised the whole week and everything that we've talked about so well, and he speaks so well. I definitely got that as that he speaks in such an accessible way, and he's just generally just seemed like such a nice guy, to put it a bit bluntly. Stephen said a lot of things, so if you do have the opportunity to listen to what he said, I definitely would. But some of the main things that really stood out to the both of us was he opened with the idea of what is a cathedral, and he talked about the chair. Ooh, the chair. What does the chair mean?
So basically what I took from it is that the chair is symbolic because it's meant to seat the bishop, which is important for the religious meaning of this idea of worship. But in the idea of the church being, in the idea of the seat being empty, it's representative of learning and teaching something. And it suggests that the church is open to new ideas and that this chair is the vessel basically of learning new ideas.
Yeah, he asked the question, is it a throne? Is it a judge's bench? Is it the church? Is it like the chair we have in Parliament? Is it a place of learning and linking to your university? Or is it a point where the gospel narrative is spread? And he kind of ended it with saying it's all 4. It's not one or the other. And the chair is so meaningful to the Anglican Church. And you really got this sense of it's about learning, about spreading Jesus's message, which I think is really lovely because it really showed that it's a place of learning, but also teaching, which is a really interesting point. And that links so well to what the conference has been talking about, is learning how to deal with what's been happening and spread the message and spread that message through the gospel thought and through the teachings of Jesus.
Yeah, I agree. And that idea that this is all still connected to Jesus, that we are learning whilst Jesus is present, whilst God is present, I think links quite nicely back to what Azariah said yesterday about that idea that God is within all of us, that when you wake up your cleaners, when you wake up your school children, when you wake up the homeless, that you wake up God, is that idea that when you teach the church something, that's doing God's work. The church is not there just to disseminate information to, quote unquote, your lowly commoners.
Yeah.
The church is also there to learn how to better provide for the community around it.
I think that's, you've explained that really well. Linking back to this idea of teaching and learning, the point that stood out to me the most is when Stephen was talking about we built cathedrals where we should have pitched tents. And that's a really weird saying when you first think about it. But when you sit and kind of imagine what that means, it means that the church has become stagnant. It's a thought of the church has settled for what it's got. It's built the ideas it has and it can't move forward. Whereas a tent, you can pick up, you can move along, you can change with the times. So it's this idea of making the cathedral more into a tent where we can move forward. And I think that's such a beautiful way to end the conference, and it brings back to the idea of we need to take on what's been discussed this week and move it forward. You can't just stay with what we've got, because that's not working. That's not going to help solve all the injustices that we've been discussing. It was a really great way to end the conference, and also a really great place to start moving forward. I don't know if you got that feeling as well, Jordan.
Yeah, there's a speech given by a guy at an award show. I can't remember the guy's name, but he says in the speech, one of his key pieces of advice for everyone is the top of one mountain is the bottom of the next. And I think that summarizes quite well what Stephen was trying to say, is that you've made a lot of change. Now, how do you keep making change rather than conceding to stagnation?
Yeah, he mentioned how amazing he thought Newcastle Cathedral were doing, which is what we talked about on our first ever podcast. And Stephen was saying that they've made so much change recently, and that's amazing. But he's also scared because he doesn't want them to then become stagnant for the last 300 years. And while he doesn't think Jeff and the current team will become stagnant, because I don't think it's in their nature, he's worried that for the people after, they might just settle for what they've got and not keep progressing, which is such a beautiful message of Stephen just really wants the best for this world, and he wants the best through the teaching of God as well, which is quite nice as well, how he doesn't want to just create a better future for the current people. He wants to not just keep pushing what's currently happened, he wants to move even more forward. You really got that idea of him wanting change and progress to be happening in the Anglican Church.
Yeah, I think Stephen basically just did a very nice concluding speech, because he just summarized the main points that everyone hit on from the past few days of constantly improving oneself whilst still connecting to the main tradition of maintaining that connection to Jesus and God. And I think he, in his speech, found a very good balance between tradition and progress.
Yeah, because it's the idea of we can fight and for change, and that's important, but we can still keep those traditions, because ultimately we're still teaching Jesus's message and teaching, and that's how you keep that idea of continuity and tradition, is if you're always teaching in Jesus's and Christ's name, you will forever be with tradition, because that will always move forward. And I think that's such a loving way to look at it. I would like to link that back to what John Major was saying on the first day, is he was stating that change can be good, but we need to make sure that values aren't being lost. And I think Stephen hit it on the nail of the head, being like, we can change as much as we want, but as long as we are keeping in Jesus's name and Jesus' teachings, we'll have that tradition no matter what. That doesn't matter, because ultimately we will be teaching in God's and Christ's name.
Yeah, I really agree. One point that I would end on is, as well as cathedrals being this place for learning, is he mentioned that Newcastle Cathedral also has a side chapel. And what I thought he said quite brilliantly about this is that, as well as the church being a place for learning and teaching and for the worship of God, the side chapel also gives people a place of refuge where they can hide away from everyone. They can hide away from the world, but they can also hide away from everyone else in the cathedral. It presents a place of complete solitude where they can reflect and where they can essentially just have a one-on-one talk with God.
Yeah, it's bringing in this idea which has kind of permeated the whole conference of sanctuary, and how cathedrals can be that and also must be that. They must be a place for people to feel at home, whether that's at home with themselves, that's at home with God. They need a place where they can feel safe and loved, and that's what a cathedral must always be. I think he spoke of it so beautifully and so welcomingly, which then comes back to this idea of people find sanctuary, warmth, they'll then find community. And what a lot of these issues need to help solve them is the idea of community, because when communities can come together and people can come together, these issues will be solved so much easier and so much quicker, and the best ideas will also come forward because you'll have so many different people's voices discussing this. Even this podcast, I would say, is this idea of community, as John and I have both discussed how we are not the typical people who are in the cathedral. We're very young compared to some of the people in the cathedral, and there's nothing wrong with that. And even our voices being heard and being discussed, it adds to the idea of community because different types of people's voices are being uplifted.
Yeah, I think you summarised it really well.
Yeah. Any last points to make on that at all, Jordan?
No, I think we've hit on everything that we needed to say.
Yeah. Although this is our last podcast and we are both very sad for it to be ending, although we will be grateful for the rest, it's important to summarise what the whole conference has been about. And while we can't talk about everything that was said in speeches or in private discussions or in workshops or private conversations people had between both of us, between one-on-one and people's more intimate private discussions with the delegate, I would like John and I to say what our favourite speeches were. Now, this isn't to say that not all of them were great. A lot of them were fantastic. A lot of them went over my head. But it's important to say what really resonated with us, because what resonated with one person didn't resonate with someone else. Actually, we both have different favourites. So Jordan, I'll let you go first. What was your, not saying number one favourite, but first favourite you want to talk about?
I would say the first one, I'm just going to go in chronological order, was Austin Ivory on the Social Justice Day. I thought, he spoke in a very complex manner, if we're going to be honest. He brought up terms like fraternal collaboration, synodality, which are very difficult terms to understand. And, I was kind of just learning them on the fly as he was speaking. But I thought he spoke quite well. And, when you actually start to analyse what he was saying, I thought it was done quite well.
It went over my head completely. So I'm glad you definitely got something out of that and you've spoken of it so well. I'm going to go next.
Yep.
I'll go in chronological order as well. Learning to speak Geordie is one of my top favourites. I just thought it was such a brilliant opening, and what Newcastle Cathedral has resonated with me so deeply. I'm actually slightly shocked how much it's meant to me and how much I was like, oh no, I get this. This is great. Not one bit of me thought, no, I don't really like that. That's not. All of it was like, yes, yeah, no, I completely get it. And they spoke so lovingly and warmly, and we've both had the privilege of spending a significant amount of time with the Newcastle team, and it's not just what they said in the speech, because it's actively done, and that resonated with me even more. If you're going to look at any speech, and I've looked on the YouTube, it's actually the most viewed video as of current, I think. So that's really great, and I really think shows how important it was, and it was just a great opening, and I can't say how much I love the Newcastle team and Jeff as much. Our first episode was nearly called Why We Love Jeff. If that shows you any amount of insight and how much it really resonated with both of us.
Yeah, I think, they were all great, and we both really enjoyed that speech. That being said, because we spoke to him today, I know he'll hate this, but we spoke to John Canessa today.
Oh, what a man. A fantastic man.
We both loved him. We didn't even realise that we had talked to him for an hour and a half. And he'll hate that his name's being brought up on this podcast. But we really love talking to him, and his work especially that he's doing. Not even, it's connected to the cathedral, but it's so loosely connected to the cathedral because he's just out there working with the community day in, day out, that his work, I think, is so important.
Yeah, and we're not going to say everything we said with John, because
a lot of it was personal.
A lot of it was stories about other people and how he has helped them or how he has listened to their story. And that's not our place to say, but if you ever have the pleasure of meeting anyone from the Newcastle team, especially John, you are in for such a treat. Such loving and devoted people, not only to God, but to genuinely helping the people of Newcastle. and making sure their voices are heard. Even just go to visit to meet John. You're not going to regret it. He's a fantastic
This episode
man.
is called Why We Love John.
Yeah,
the first one was Why We Love Jeff. It's come full circle.
Yeah, no, they're both fantastic. Peter is also great. Can't miss out Peter. Had a great conversation with Peter. He is so lovely and was actually used to be my boyfriend's person in charge of his church. I'm not going to say the wrong term because it'll get cut out. But he used to be in charge of my boyfriend's church. And he's also fantastic and so loving and very, honestly, it's just, again, why we love
everyone in the church in the cathedral was just great.
Yeah, this is, again, just the idea of we love Newcastle Cathedral. We're going to be back. Don't worry. We'll do anything for you pretty much within reason because you're all just great. Anyway, we need to be redirected into talking about what was your second favourite, John, before we go back into Newcastle talk.
My second favourite, and I know we said we're probably not going to do it in order of the favourite, but my second favourite, I will say it was my favourite, was the Pentecostal man himself, Robert Beckford, because there were things that I missed in his speech because, everyone was laughing at just his ADHD manic behaviour just bouncing across the stage.
He has such stage presence, honestly. He's great.
I've never met, someone who works in the church quite like him.
No.
He's just so different.
Yeah. In the best way possible. Can we just start saying, we're not going, he's a bit weird. No, he's great. He's fantastic.
He was great. Also, if he wants to talk, I'll talk to him as well.
Honestly, pretty much anyone who spoke we'll talk to because everyone was just really cool.
And not even a thing of, I want to talk to him about his topic. I kind of just want to talk to him in general.
Honestly, I don't know what would come out of his mouth. Not in like a bad way, just like he is so, you can tell he's so intelligent, but he's so like energy filled that you're like, oh, it would be chaos, but in the best way.
Yeah, I really liked him. Do you want to say your next one?
Yeah, my next one is Mark Russell, who talked about children and how to help children. And what a passionate man. I would say that out of everyone, he was maybe the most passionate. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Jordan, but you could just tell his life was about helping children and in the best way possible. Because to bring this back to John, because we love John was telling a story about a mummy chicken and mummy elephant and how they go on walks every day and they love their walks. But slowly, mummy chicken can't keep going on these walks because she has to sit on eggs. And mummy elephant loves mummy chicken and she wants to see it every day, but she can't. So she goes, oh, I need to help you. So she takes mummy chicken off her eggs and then sits on them for her. Which is a message, if you don't know the message, it's about you can't always just decide what's best for people. You need to ask them what's best for them. You need to go, what is your pet? What do you need? And how can I help you with that need? And Mark Russell embodies that. He really takes the voices of children and leads it to systemic change, which is a brilliant thing. And he is actually making that systemic change. And I'm so excited to see what he does in the future because I think the only thing that could stop that man is getting hit by a bus. And even then, I don't think it would stop here. He is constantly on the go, constantly wanting to know what's best and constantly listening to the people he's trying to help, which I think is such a rarity sometimes.
Yeah, he was really good at speaking. My final favourite is Azariah Franz Williams because his energy as well was great. It was completely different to Robert's, but it was so strong in him telling poems and also in giving allegorical stories like that of Quasimodo, which Quasimodo is probably the part that's stuck in my head the most because if anyone's going to explain something to me, for some reason, an allegorical story is the easiest way to get it across. I love hearing something like that. So for him to tell that story, I was like, that's great.
Yeah, he had such a different way of speaking to everyone else. And I thought that was so great to sort of break up his own speech and to show how he was sort of different. It really stuck out purely just because of the way he spoke. I thought it was great. Lastly is mine. And mine is actually by Julian Altwood. I'm really sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. I'm not great with names. I'll just put it out there now. And his speech is on real zero emissions. And this man is bonkers in a fantastic way. He is an engineer, and he was talking about how it is possible to get to real zero emissions. And the church decided that they want to get to zero emissions by 2030. And he essentially just ripped that in half and said, nope, you're not going to do it the way you're going to do it. This is how you do it. And it was such a dose of reality, which I thought was really cool and needed as well, because with climate change, there's this ticking time bomb of once you get to a point, can't change it. And if you want to create real change, these are steps you're going to need to do. And he completely tore apart, as I said, what the church were planning to do. And he showed directly with many graphs he kept throwing empty water cartons at. Not joking, actually was, because he didn't have a pointer, because he's an engineer and just loves graphs, as he kept referencing a lot. You need to do these things. And you could tell in the audience, people were constantly taking photos, and he said he would send out the slides of how to show people of how to actually create, and how the cathedrals can directly create, and how we talk about all these other things and solutions. They're not going to work. And actually what we need to do is do these things, because if not, 1 billion people are going to die. And that was really striking of actually, there's urgency with all of these. But when you hear there's 1 billion people will just die, that really puts it into perspective how much of this is not only climate injustice, it is a climate crisis in capital letters of we don't want 1 billion people to die. And this is the reality we needed in the conference to be like, this needs to change. This needs to change now. Like with all of them. All this is injustice. It needs to change. But yeah, there's our top 3. As like we said before, every speaker spoke so well and spoke about things so great. And it was such a privilege to listen to them. Have you got any last remarks or thoughts at all of the conference in general or anything like that, Jordan?
No, I don't think so. We've done a lot of content over the past 4 days, so I think everything I've needed to say is already on record.
Yeah. And if you do want to learn any more about the conference, I'm pretty sure all of the speeches are getting uploaded to YouTube, so please check them out. They're so fascinating, and we've not covered everything in great detail because there's just so much you could do. We could do an hour podcast on each speech. So if you get the opportunity, please listen to them. They're fantastic. And remember to keep those conversations not only with yourself but with the people you are close to share the messages of what these people are saying, to implement the things that are needed to create true change and help solve these injustices. To conclude, we both just want to say it's been so great recording this podcast, and we've loved making it, and we've loved this placement in general. As we've said before, we are 2 Northumbria students, and this was part of a module we had to do to get placement, but I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. I thought I'd get a lot out of it, and I think you'd agree, Jordan, but we've both genuinely can't express how much we've genuinely loved it. Even the long days, the running about, the stressing, it has been worth it. And we'd like to have a special mention to Jane, Catherine, Peter, Georgina, Simon, Dan and Jess, even if she was wearing noise cancelling headphones for the whole 4 days, for helping us and supporting us and generally making the placement a wonderful experience it has. And we hope the feeling is reciprocated and that our paths cross in the future. You're all just such genuinely nice people, and this experience would not have been the same without you. It's been great sharing a really hot, stuffy room with you for 4 days, as joyous as that sounds. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and that's all from us for now. Thanks, Jordan and Kate.
Bye.
Bye.